How does a brand identity for a city go together with being able to be really creative?
I think every city is probably in the core very creative because there are so many pockets of communities that define the brand and that all build together, build kind of the sum of everything is the brand. And as we talked about earlier, we've seen examples of cities trying to really uniform how a city should be perceived by making it very visual and having extremely tight guidelines on how things could look. But I think there's a true value in being able to have a framework that people understand and then people can relate to, but probably more in a storytelling framework that, you know, we tend to tell the same stories because they are true. Don't kind of invent stuff that isn't true, instead of trying to make a very strong visual guideline. And we've seen some conflicts in this, both historical, because that sometimes conflicts with, you know, a political wish to have a logo on stuff and to kind of point to something and say, this is what we are. But what we are is what we are. And I think that's not, you know, you can't really translate that down to one logo.
So is uniformity, is logo not important at all when creating a city brand?
You can get different answers asking that questions depending on who you ask. But in my opinion, and from the research that we've done and the research that we look at, consumers making a decision to go somewhere, they don't make that decision based on which city's got the best or most interesting logo. They base those decisions on which city kind of talks to them in the best way, which city they can identify themselves with in the best way, where they can get value for money, where they can actually maybe even learn something. That's kind of what's in the mix of deciding where to go, not a logo. That's on the consumer side. I have a great understanding and of course accept the fact that we work with logos in a more strategic approach in terms of business to business relations. But when we talk about consumer behavior, logos are not important when talking about cities.
How do you create then a consistency when communicating the Copenhagen brand?
I think that's very much back to the storytelling. If you keep telling the right stories and you have a great framework around the stories you want to tell from the city that are true and that you keep coming back to, you do create a sense of uniformity, because that's also very much a guideline for the people working in the city that want to communicate by themselves. And I think in the case of a city, you can't really point to one person and say, you are the brand manager and you have the responsibility to do this. In a city, there are as many brand managers as there are citizens. And I think, therefore, you need to create a framework that people can understand, some storytelling that's true and that corresponds with the people living in the city and the activities that goes on in the city. That's what kind of builds the brand, and that's how you should do the framework.